The day I discovered our joint account had been drained to zero, I found a receipt for a $15,000 diamond bracelet hidden in my husband's uniform pocket. That night, I overheard Marcus whispering into his phone, "Don't worry, baby. Sarah thinks the money's gone because of a bank error. I've already moved it to our secret account. You'll have everything you need for the condo down payment." As I stood frozen in our hallway, clutching the receipt like a murder weapon, I decided that if my decorated war hero husband wanted to play games with our 15 years of marriage, I would show him what a real tactical operation looked like. Never expected to become the kind of woman who checks her husband's pockets, but when $37,542 disappears from your joint savings account without explanation, desperate measures feel justified. 2 days earlier, I'd logged into our banking app to pay the property tax bill on our home, the modest 2-story colonial we'd bought after Marcus returned from his second deployment. What I found was an account balance showing exactly $127.36 just I. Like that, our emergency fund, our vacation savings, and the money we'd been setting aside for kitchen renovations, all of it vanished. I immediately called Marcus, who was supposedly at a 4-day military training exercise at Fort Benning. "There must be some mistake," he said, his voice sounding distant and slightly irritated. "I'll call the bank when I get back on Monday. But I'm in the middle of training now. It's probably just a system error." His dismissive tone should have been my first warning, but after 15 years of marriage to an Army captain, I was accustomed to not questioning his judgment. Marcus Winters had earned a Silver Star for valor during the Battle of Kamdesh. He'd led his men through scenarios I couldn't begin to comprehend. If he said it was probably a bank error, I believed him. I spent that day in a state of nervous agitation. Our finances had always been meticulously managed, mostly by me, as Marcus preferred to focus on his military career. We weren't wealthy by any means, but we were comfortable. Marcus's military salary combined with my income as a high school counselor allowed us to live within our means and save consistently. The thought of nearly $40,000 disappearing into thin air made me nauseated. I tried calling the bank myself, but without Marcus's authorization on the joint account, they would only confirm that a withdrawal had been made, not by whom or where. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Winters, but for security reasons, we can only discuss those details with both account holders present," the representative informed me politely but firmly. By Sunday night, my anxiety had evolved into something darker. Marcus wasn't answering my texts except with brief one-word responses. "Fine. Later. Busy." After 15 years together, I knew something wasn't right. That's when I did what I'd never done before. I went through his things. The receipt was folded neatly in the breast pocket of his dress uniform, the one he reserved for special occasions. Cartier 18K rose gold diamond pave bracelet, $15,249.99. The date stamped on it was 3 days earlier, the day before our account was emptied. My hands began to shake. Marcus had never bought me jewelry that expensive. For our 10th anniversary, he'd given me a simple silver necklace with a small diamond pendant that couldn't have cost more than $500. I'd treasured it, not for its monetary value, but because he'd chosen it himself, saying the sparkle reminded him of the light in my eyes. "Who was this for?" I whispered to the empty room, already knowing it wasn't for me. I should have confronted him immediately, called him and demanded an explanation. But something held me back, a strange, icy calm that settled over me as I sat, on our bed, the receipt still pinched between my trembling fingers. Instead, I did what Marcus had taught me over years of his deployments. I assessed the situation before taking action. I carefully returned the receipt exactly as I'd found it, and pulled out my laptop. I checked our credit card statements, looking for patterns in his spending that might have escaped my notice before. There were small charges I hadn't paid attention to. Coffees at a cafe near the base that I knew he didn't frequent. Dinners at restaurants on evenings when he'd told me he was working late. A weekend stay at a boutique hotel in Savannah when he was supposedly on a fishing trip with his army buddies. Small deceptions that, when viewed together, painted a picture I couldn't deny. For months, perhaps longer, Marcus had been living a double life. The realization didn't hit me like a dramatic revelation in a movie. Instead, it settled into my consciousness like a heavy weight, one painful gram at a time, until I felt crushed beneath the truth of it. Monday arrived, and with it, Marcus returned home. He kissed my cheek absently as he dropped his duffel bag by the door. He looked tired, his normally crisp appearance slightly rumpled, dark circles under his eyes. "I'll shower, then call the bank," he said, already heading up the stairs. I nodded, saying nothing. The stranger before me wore my husband's face, spoke with his voice, but was somehow not the man I'd married. As the shower started running, his phone, left carelessly on the kitchen counter, lit up with a text message. I'd never checked his phone before. It was an unspoken boundary in our marriage. But that boundary, like so many others, had already been crossed without my knowledge. The text preview showed only, "Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Missed you too much this weekend." The sender was listed as Greg S., supposedly one of his subordinates at the base. I'd met Greg at the last military family picnic. He was a 22-year-old specialist who talked enthusiastically about his fiancée back in Ohio. I doubted very much that he sent heart emojis to my 43-year-old husband. I didn't touch the phone. I didn't need to. Instead, I busied myself making coffee, presenting the perfect image of a dutiful military wife when Marcus came downstairs, freshly showered and smelling of the sandalwood cologne I'd given him for Christmas. "I'm going to call the bank now," he announced, picking up his phone and frowning slightly at the notification. He glanced at me quickly, but I kept my expression neutral as I handed him a cup of coffee. "I'll be in my study," he said, taking the mug and heading to the small room, off the living room that served as his home office. He closed the door behind him, something he rarely did when making ordinary calls. I moved silently down the hallway, positioning myself just outside the study door. Marcus had always prided himself on his strategic mind, his ability to plan operations that left nothing to chance. But in that moment, he made the classic mistake of underestimating his opponent, me. The study's door was solid oak, but the walls of our aging colonial were thin. Marcus's deep voice carried clearly as he made his call, not to our bank, but to someone else entirely. "Hey, baby," he said, his voice dropping to that low, intimate tone I recognized from the early days of our marriage. "No, I'm home now. Yeah, she doesn't suspect anything yet. I told her it was a bank error and she bought it." I pressed my hand against the wall, steadying myself as the room seemed to tilt sideways. Still, I remained silent, listening. "The candy bracelet? You loved it? Good." His voice was warm, pleased. "I wanted you to have something special before I handle this divorce business. Something that shows you what's coming once I'm free." Divorce. The word hit me like a physical blow. We'd had our challenges like any couple, but Marcus had never once mentioned being unhappy, let alone wanting to end our marriage. "Don't worry about the money," he continued. "I've moved it all to the account we set up. Sarah will never find it, and by the time she realizes what's happening, my lawyer will have everything locked down tight. She'll be lucky if she keeps the house, and even that's not guaranteed." I bit down hard on my knuckle to keep from making a sound. The taste of copper filled my mouth as my teeth broke skin. "The condo down payment is just the beginning, baby. We're going to have the life we talked about." "Yeah, I know military retirement isn't much, but with my new security consulting job lined up, we'll be set." Sarah never supported my transition to private sector work. She was always content with me just being a lifer in the Army. But you understand my potential. I'd never discouraged Marcus from leaving the military. In fact, I'd suggested several times that he consider it, especially after his last deployment when he'd returned more withdrawn than before. He'd always insisted that the army was his calling, his purpose. Apparently, that had been yet another lie. Tomorrow night, same place. I know I can hardly wait either. It's been torture sleeping in the same bed with her, pretending everything's normal. His voice turned harder, colder. Don't worry, it won't be much longer now. 2 months max, and this will all be behind us. 2 months. He had a timeline for dismantling our life together. I gotta go. I need to make a show of calling the bank. Yeah, I'll tell her they're investigating the error or some bullshit. She trusts me completely. Why wouldn't she? I'm a decorated officer, he added with a laugh that I didn't recognize, a sound so callous and unfamiliar that it made my skin crawl. Love you too, Vanessa. See you tomorrow. Vanessa. The name burned into my mind like a brand. Who was she? How long had this been going on? I had no answers, only the sickening certainty that the man I'd loved, the man I'd supported through 3 deployments, the man whose nightmares I'd soothed and whose wounds, both visible and invisible, I'd helped heal, had betrayed me in the most fundamental way possible. I slipped away from the door before Marcus could emerge, retreating to the kitchen where I mindlessly wiped already clean counters. A minute later, he appeared, his expression carefully arranged into one of concern. I just got off with the bank, he said, setting his phone down. They're investigating the withdrawal. Apparently, there have been some sophisticated cyber attacks, targeting military accounts lately. They've escalated it to their fraud department and said it could take up to 10 business days to resolve. I looked at my husband, this stranger wearing the face of the man I loved, and nodded as if I believed. Every word. That's good to hear, I said, my voice remarkably steady despite the storm raging inside me. I was really worried. Marcus smiled, the same reassuring smile he'd given me before each deployment. Don't worry, babe. I've got this handled. You always do, I replied, turning away to hide the tears that threatened to spill over. That night, as Marcus slept soundly beside me, I stared at the ceiling, my mind churning with questions, with pain, with rage. The man who had promised to love and honor me was planning to leave me destitute. The man who had built his career on integrity and service was stealing from his own family. The man who had once been my entire world was now a stranger lying next to me in the dark. I thought about waking him, confronting him with what I knew, demanding explanations. I imagined the shouting, the denials that would inevitably turn to blame. You were emotionally unavailable. You didn't understand the pressures I was under. You let yourself go. All the classic excuses of men who betray their wives. I'd heard them from the women in my support group, military spouses who had been left behind in more ways than one. No, confrontation wouldn't serve me now. If Marcus had taught me anything during our years together, it was the value of strategic thinking. In battle, the element of surprise is often your greatest advantage, he'd told me once, describing a particularly difficult operation. The moment you reveal your position, you lose control of the situation. I would not lose control. I would not give Marcus the satisfaction of seeing me broken. Instead, I would use every tool at my disposal to ensure that when this war ended, I would still be standing. As the first light of dawn filtered through our bedroom curtains, I had made my decision. Marcus Winters thought he had orchestrated the perfect extraction. From our marriage, from his responsibilities, from his vows. He thought his military training had prepared him for every contingency, but he had forgotten a crucial fact. I had been training too, learning his tactics, studying his methods, all while he thought I was simply being a supportive wife. I might not have led men into battle, but I had spent 15 years watching a master strategist at work. Now, I would put those lessons to use. I slipped quietly from our bed and headed to the shower, letting the hot water wash away my tears, my doubt, my hesitation. As I dressed for my job at the high school, I looked at myself in the mirror. really looked at the woman I had become during my years with Marcus. I was stronger than I knew, more resourceful than he gave me credit for. And I had one advantage he didn't expect. I knew his plans, while he believed me ignorant. "Game on, Captain Winters," I whispered to my reflection. "Let's see who the better tactician really is." Before discovering the emptied account, I had believed Marcus and I were a team. The battle-hardened soldier and the supportive wife, each playing our roles in a marriage I thought was built on mutual respect and shared sacrifice. We met during my senior year of college when I was volunteering at a military hospital. Marcus had just returned from his first deployment with a shrapnel wound to his left shoulder. I was the volunteer who brought him books and magazines during his recovery, drawn to his quiet strength and unwavering dedication to his unit. After 3 months of cautious friendship, he asked me on a proper date. 6 months later, he proposed before leaving for his second tour. We married 2 weeks after his return, in a simple ceremony attended by his fellow soldiers and my small circle of family and friends. I wore a cream-colored dress I'd found on sale, and Marcus wore his dress uniform, the sun glinting off his medals as we exchanged vows under the oak trees at Fort Benning. Those early years weren't easy. The military lifestyle demanded flexibility, resilience, and a willingness to put dreams on hold. We moved 3 times in our first 5 years of marriage, always following Marcus's assignments. I completed my master's degree in counseling piecemeal, taking classes wherever we were stationed. When I finally secured my position as a high school guidance counselor in our current town, it felt like a miracle, a chance to build a career while supporting Marcus through the ups and downs of military life. We never had children, though we'd tried. After 2 miscarriages, the doctors discovered scarring from an infection I'd contracted during our stint at an overseas base. Marcus had been disappointed, but understanding. "We're still a family," he'd told me, holding me as I cried. "You and me against the world." Or so I'd believed. After discovering Marcus's betrayal, I drove to work in a fog of disbelief and heartache. Somehow, I made it through my morning appointments with students, nodding and offering guidance about college applications while my personal life crumbled around me. During my lunch break, I locked my office door and began making a list of what I knew and what I needed to find out. Facts: $37,542 missing from our joint account. A $15,000 bracelet purchased for someone named Vanessa. A condo down payment mentioned. A timeline of 2 months until Marcus planned to leave me. A secret account where he'd stashed our money. Questions: who was Vanessa? How long had this been going on? What security consulting job had he lined up? Most importantly, how could I protect myself financially when Marcus had already emptied our joint account? I needed answers, and I needed them quickly. But I also needed to maintain the illusion that I suspected nothing. The element of surprise, as Marcus would say, was critical to success. After work, I stopped at the library instead of heading home. Using a public computer rather than our home network, I searched for information about divorce laws in our state. What I found wasn't encouraging. As a military spouse, I had certain protections under the Uniformed Services Former Spouses Protection Act, but those mainly applied to pension rights after a long-term marriage. If Marcus left the military for private sector work before filing for divorce, as he seemed to be planning, those protections might be compromised. I also looked up Vanessa's name combined with our city and military to see what might surface. Nothing conclusive appeared. The name was too common. I'd need more information. My next stop was a different branch of our bank, one where Marcus and I weren't known. I approached a financial advisor and explained that I wanted to understand my options for establishing independent finances. "My husband and I have always shared everything," I explained, the half-truth bitter on my tongue. "But with him considering a career change, I think it might be time for me to establish my own accounts and credit." The advisor, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, nodded. That's very sensible. Financial independence is important for everyone, regardless of marital status. She walked me through the steps of establishing my own accounts, building credit in my name alone, and protecting my income. I opened a new account at a different bank that afternoon, arranging for my next paycheck to be deposited there instead of our joint account. It wasn't much. A school counselor's salary wouldn't rebuild $37,000 overnight, but it was a start. Is there anything else I should know? I asked the advisor before leaving. She hesitated, studying my face. When someone is contemplating major financial changes, it's always wise to gather documentation of all existing assets and debts, just for clarity. I understood her careful phrasing. She'd seen women like me before, women with the particular look of having discovered something devastating about their marriages. Women trying to prepare for the storm while pretending the skies were still clear. "Thank you," I said. "I appreciate the clarity." That evening, I cooked Marcus's favorite meal, grilled steak with roasted potatoes and asparagus. I wore the blue dress he once said brought out my eyes. I poured us both glasses of the Cabernet we'd discovered during a rare weekend getaway for our 12th anniversary. To anyone watching, I was the picture of a devoted wife welcoming her husband home. "What's the occasion?" Marcus asked, loosening his tie as he surveyed the dining room table. I smiled, the expression feeling strange on my face, like a mask that didn't quite fit. "No occasion. I just thought we could use a nice dinner after the stress of the bank situation." Marcus nodded, a flicker of something, guilt, concern, crossing his features before his expression settled into appreciation. "Looks delicious. Let me just wash up." While he was upstairs, I checked his phone again. No new messages from Greg S. visible on the lock screen. Marcus had probably been more careful after his slip-up yesterday. No matter. I didn't need his phone to confirm what I already knew. Over dinner, I kept the conversation light, asking about his training weekend, sharing amusing stories about my students. I laughed at his jokes, refilled his wine glass, played the role of the contented wife with an Oscar-worthy performance. All the while, I was cataloging his tells, the way he checked his watch when he thought I wasn't looking, the slight tension around his mouth when I mentioned future plans, how he steered the conversation away from anything related to our finances or his career prospects. "Any update from the bank today?" I asked casually as we cleared the plates. Marcus shook his head, eyes focused on rinsing a wine glass. "Not yet. They said it could take up to 10 days, remember? These investigations move slowly." I nodded, placing a hand on his shoulder. "I'm not worried. I trust you to handle it." His shoulders relaxed slightly under my touch, the tension easing from his posture. He believed I was still in the dark, still the trusting, somewhat naive wife he could manipulate with practiced ease. The relief in his eyes was almost painful to witness. "I've got an early meeting tomorrow," he said after helping me load the dishwasher. "I should get some sleep." I smiled, pressing a light kiss to his cheek. "I'll be up in a bit. Just want to finish grading these career assessment tests." Alone in the kitchen, I dropped the act, allowing my true feelings to surface briefly. Rage, hurt, betrayal. Each emotion washed over me in waves, threatening to pull me under. But I couldn't afford to drown in them now. I had work to do. I waited until I heard the shower running, then quietly entered Marcus's study. His laptop sat on the desk, password protected, but not impossible to access. After 15 years of marriage, I knew his patterns. His passwords always included some combination of his military service, his first deployment location, the name of his unit, the call sign he'd used in Afghanistan. After 3 attempts, I was in. I didn't have much time. I quickly scanned his email, finding nothing incriminating in his primary account. But a quick check of his browser history showed regular visits to a Gmail account I didn't recognize. Winters, privateigmail.com. The account was logged out, and I didn't have the password for that one. I moved on, checking his recently opened files. There, in a folder labeled Transition Docs, I found what I was looking for. A letter of intent from Meridian Security Solutions, offering him a position as Director of Operations at their Atlanta office, with a starting salary of $195,000, plus benefits and stock options. The start date was exactly 2 months away, aligning perfectly with the timeline he'd mentioned to Vanessa. I took photos of the document with my phone, then continued searching. In the same folder, I found correspondence with a realtor in Atlanta inquiring about luxury condos in Buckhead. The emails mentioned you and Vanessa repeatedly, confirming they were planning to move in together. One listing in particular had been marked as a favorite, a 2-bedroom penthouse priced at $750,000. So that's where my money was going. The down payment on a love nest for my husband and his mistress. I heard the shower turn off and quickly closed all the files, erased the browser history showing my searches, and shut down the laptop. By the time Marcus emerged from the bathroom, I was sitting at the kitchen island, papers spread before me, the perfect image of a dedicated educator. "Coming to bed soon?" he asked, his hair still damp, wearing the gray t-shirt I'd bought him last Christmas. "Just a few more minutes," I replied without looking up. "These kids and their career goals won't assess themselves." He chuckled and headed upstairs, leaving me alone with my thoughts and newfound information. The next morning, Marcus left early for his meeting, dropping a quick kiss on my forehead before heading out the door. As soon as his car pulled away, I sprang into action, calling in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. My first call was to our home insurance agent, requesting copies of all our policies. I needed to know exactly what assets we had and how they were protected. Next, I called our mortgage company to verify the status of our loan and whose names were on it. Both of us, thankfully, were listed as borrowers. Then I drove to the bank where we held our now empty joint account and requested a full statement of all transactions for the past 6 months. The teller looked apologetic. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Winters, but since it's a joint account, we need both account holders to request historical statements in person." I nodded, having anticipated this. "I understand. My husband mentioned there might be some suspicious activity on the account. He asked me to check if there were any unusual withdrawals before the most recent one." The teller's expression softened. "Well, I can certainly look at recent activity with you. Let me pull that up." She clicked through several screens, then turned the monitor slightly so I could see. There were a series of transfers over the last 3 months, all to an external account. They started small, about $500 each, but the most recent was the large withdrawal that emptied the account. "Can you tell where the money went?" I asked, keeping my voice steady despite the confirmation that Marcus had been planning this for months, gradually testing the waters with smaller transfers before making his big move. "I can only see that it went to another financial institution," she replied. "The account details are confidential." I thanked her and left, my suspicions confirmed. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision on Marcus's part. This was a calculated campaign of financial infidelity that had likely been underway for as long as his emotional and physical infidelity. My next stop was the office of Diana Chen, a divorce attorney whose name I'd gotten from a colleague who'd gone through a contentious split the previous year. Her office was in a converted Victorian house downtown, elegant but not intimidating. "I believe my husband is planning to leave me," I told her after the preliminary introductions. "He's already emptied our joint savings account of nearly $40,000 and appears to be setting up a new life with another woman." Diana didn't look surprised. After 20 years of practice, I imagined very little shocked her anymore. "Do you have any documentation of the withdrawal?" I slid the bank statement I'd requested across her desk. "I also have photos of job offer, letters and real estate correspondence suggesting he's planning to relocate to Atlanta with this other woman." She nodded, reviewing the documents with a practiced eye. And how long have you been married? 15 years in September. Is your husband still active duty military? Yes, but he's planning to transition to private sector work soon. That's part of his plan, I believe. The job starts in 2 months, which is when I think he plans to tell me about the divorce. Diana made a few notes, then looked up at me with clear, direct eyes. Mrs. Winters, what you're describing is a calculated attempt to hide marital assets, which is both unethical and potentially illegal. The courts take a very dim view of this kind of behavior. I felt a small surge of hope. So I can get the money back? Potentially, yes, but these cases can be complex and drawn out. The sooner we file, the better position you'll be in to reclaim your share of the marital assets. I shook my head firmly. I'm not ready to file yet. I need more information, more evidence. And to be honest, I'm not sure I want him to know that I know. Diana gave me a measured look. May I ask why? I thought about Marcus, about his strategic mind, about the way he approached every challenge like a military operation. If I revealed my hand too soon, he would simply adjust his tactics. I needed to be several moves ahead. Because right now, I have the advantage of surprise, I explained. He thinks I'm in the dark, which means he'll continue making mistakes. Once he knows I'm aware of his plans, he'll be more careful. A smile ghosted across Diana's face. I understand. In that case, let's talk about how to legally document everything without tipping him off. You'll need to be methodical about gathering evidence. For the next hour, she outlined the steps I should take. Photographing all valuable items in our home, securing copies of tax returns and financial statements, documenting any unusual behavior or spending patterns. She also advised me to keep a detailed journal of any conversations related to our finances or Marcus's plans. And whatever you do, she emphasized, don't confront him until we have a complete picture and a solid strategy in place. Men like your husband, methodical planners, often have contingency plans for their contingency plans. We need to be equally prepared. I left her office with a renewed sense of purpose and a list of concrete actions to take. Marcus might have been trained in military strategy, but I had something more powerful on my side. The absolute clarity that comes from having nothing left to lose. Armed with Diana's advice, I created a detailed inventory of our possessions, starting with the obvious valuables, Marcus's military memorabilia collection, including rare medals and insignia he'd traded for with other veterans, the antique Rolleiflex camera that had belonged to his grandfather, my grandmother's pearl necklace, our modest collection of artwork purchased during our travels. I photographed everything, creating a digital record along with estimated values. Next came the financial documentation. I didn't have access to all our records. Marcus had always handled our investments, claiming his military background made him more disciplined with money management. The irony wasn't lost on me now. However, I did have our joint tax returns for the past several years, which provided a roadmap to our financial history. I discovered retirement accounts I hadn't known existed, investment properties in Virginia that Marcus had apparently purchased using his military housing allowance during a previous posting, and a life insurance policy with a substantial cash value. Each discovery felt like another betrayal, another secret kept from me while I believed we were partners in all things. The Marcus I thought I knew, honorable, straightforward, dedicated to service, was crumbling before my eyes, replaced by a calculating stranger who had been systematically preparing to discard me for years. That evening, as I prepared dinner, Marcus called to say he'd be working late. I kept my voice neutral, even sympathetic, as I assured him I'd keep his plate warm. After hanging up, I checked the GPS location on his phone using our shared family tracking app, a system we'd set up years ago for safety. He wasn't at the base as he claimed, but at an address in Riverside, the upscale neighborhood across town. I plugged the address into a property record search and discovered it belonged to a Vanessa Reyes, purchased 18 months earlier. So, their relationship wasn't new. While I'd been supporting Marcus through what I thought was post-deployment adjustment, he'd been building a relationship with another woman. I wanted to drive over there, to see this woman who had captivated my husband so completely that he was willing to throw away 15 years of marriage. I wanted to pound on her door and demand answers. I wanted to unleash all the rage and hurt that I'd been carefully containing. Instead, I took a deep breath and remembered Diana's advice. Emotional reactions make for poor strategy. I needed to be smarter than that. So I stayed home, ate my dinner alone, and continued my methodical evidence gathering. Looking through our financial records, I noticed something odd. For the past year, Marcus's military salary had been deposited as usual, but certain supplemental payments, his housing allowance, his hazardous duty pay, had been diverted elsewhere. These diversions had started small, but grown increasingly substantial, coinciding with the timeline of his relationship with Vanessa. I also discovered several credit cards in Marcus's name alone with significant balances, over $23,000 across 3 cards. The statements showed charges at high-end restaurants, jewelry stores, and hotels, expenses that had never been part of our shared life. Meanwhile, he'd insisted we cut back on household expenses, claiming the military was delaying some of his special duty payments due to administrative issues. By midnight, I had compiled a detailed dossier on our financial situation. The picture it painted was grim. While maintaining the appearance of our middle-class married life, Marcus had been systematically diverting funds to finance a far more luxurious lifestyle with Vanessa. Now, with the emptying of our joint account, he had crossed the line from deception to outright theft. I slept in the guest bedroom that night, unable to bear the thought of lying next to him when he eventually returned. I told myself it was to avoid suspicion, a headache, a desire not to disturb him. But the truth was simpler. I couldn't stomach the pretense anymore. Not in our bed. Not in the dark. The next morning, after Marcus left for work, I called in, sick again, and drove to Fort Benning, where I'd made an appointment with the Military Family Support Office. The counselor, a retired sergeant named Gloria with steel-gray hair and kind eyes that had seen everything, listened without judgment as I explained my situation in careful, measured terms. "This happens more often than you'd think," she said, when I finished. "The military lifestyle creates unique pressures on marriages. Long separations, the intensity of combat experience, the constant relocations. They can create fissures that some couples don't survive." "I thought we were stronger than that," I said, my voice smaller than I intended. Gloria nodded. "Most people do. But that's not why you're here, is it? You're not looking for explanations. You're looking for protection." She was right. I needed practical advice, not emotional validation. What are my rights as a military spouse in this situation? For the next hour, Gloria walked me through the resources available to me. Legal assistance through the Judge Advocate General's office, financial counseling, housing support if needed. She explained how the military viewed financial abandonment of dependents seriously, and what protections existed under military regulations that civilian spouses often didn't know about. Your husband has a duty to support you financially, regardless of the state of your marriage, until there's a formal court order determining otherwise. That's military regulation. If he's diverting his housing allowance, which is specifically provided for family support, that's a violation he could be held accountable for by his command. She helped me draft a letter documenting the financial abandonment, though she advised holding it in reserve rather than submitting it immediately. "This is your nuclear option," she explained. "Once you involve his command, there's no going back. It will affect his career, possibly his pension. Make sure that's what you want before you deploy it." I left with a folder of resources and a slightly stronger sense of security. Marcus hadn't just betrayed me as a husband, he'd violated his obligations as a service member. That knowledge was power, a card I could play if necessary. but I still needed more information about Vanessa Reyes. Who was she? How had she and Marcus met? What did she know about me? After stopping for coffee to clear my head, I made my way to the real estate office listed on the property records for her home. The receptionist was young and eager to help. "I'm looking for information about a property in Riverside," I explained. "It's similar to what my husband and I are considering, and I was hoping to learn more about the neighborhood." "Of course. Which property?" I showed her the address on my phone, and she pulled it up in their system. "Oh, the Reyes property. That's one of our managed rentals. Ms. Reyes is leasing it from one of our investment clients." This was unexpected. "So she doesn't own it?" "No, she's on a 3-year lease. Very steady tenant according to our records. Works at the VA hospital as some kind of administrator, I believe. The Veterans Affairs Hospital." That explained how she and Marcus might have met. After his shoulder injury flared up again last year, he'd been receiving treatment there regularly. I'd offered to accompany him to appointments several times, but he'd insisted it wasn't necessary. Now I understood why. "Thank you," I told the receptionist. "That's very helpful." On my way home, I stopped at the VA hospital, claiming I needed to pick up prescription refills for my husband. While waiting at the pharmacy, I casually asked the technician if she knew Vanessa Reyes. "Dr. Reyes?" "Sure, everyone knows her. She's the new chief of psychiatry, specializes in PTSD treatment for combat veterans. Brilliant doctor, from what I hear. So not just any homewrecker, but a highly educated, professionally successful one. A doctor who specialized in treating the very condition Marcus had struggled with after his last deployment. The pieces were falling into place. I returned home just before noon, changed into running clothes, and headed out for a 5-mile loop around our neighborhood. My normal Tuesday routine, which would prevent any suspicion if Marcus happened to check on my whereabouts. While running, I called my closest friend, Amara, who had been through her own divorce 3 years earlier. "I need a favor," I said after catching her up on my situation. "If I give you access to my email, can you set up accounts for me that Marcus won't know about? New email, cloud storage, that sort of thing? I need somewhere secure to store documents." "Of course," Amara replied without hesitation. "And you should stay with me if things get ugly. My guest room is yours for as long as you need it." The offer brought unexpected tears to my eyes. After spending days immersed in Marcus's betrayal, Amara's simple loyalty was overwhelming. "Thank you. I might take you up on that." That evening, Marcus texted that he would be home late again due to training exercises. I didn't bother checking his location this time. Instead, I focused on the next phase of my plan. Diana had emphasized the importance of understanding exactly what financial resources were available to me. While I had a general picture of our assets, I needed details about the accounts Marcus controlled exclusively, particularly the one where he'd transferred our joint savings. The problem was accessing this information without alerting him to my investigation. Direct inquiries to financial institutions would send notifications to the account holder. I needed a different approach. The solution came from an unexpected source, a documentary I'd watched months earlier about identity theft. The show had explained how scammers often posed as bank officials to extract information from unwitting victims. I would use the same technique, not to steal, but to reclaim what was rightfully mine. I spent the evening researching Marcus's bank, memorizing their protocols, terminology, and customer service scripts. I studied their online banking features and security measures. By the time Marcus came home, smelling faintly of unfamiliar perfume and whiskey, I had a plan. The next morning, after he left for work, I drove to an office supply store in the next town over and purchased a burner phone with cash. Back home, I set up a call forwarding service that would display the bank's customer service number when I called. Then I waited. At precisely 2:17 p.m., when I knew Marcus would be between meetings, I made the call. "Good afternoon, Captain Winters," I said when he answered, my voice professional and slightly lower than normal. aided by the voice modifier app I'd installed on the burner phone. "This is Meredith Collins from First National Bank's Security Department. I'm calling about some potentially suspicious activity on your account ending in 4738. There was a pause before Marcus responded, his voice instantly alert. "What kind of suspicious activity?" "We've detected login attempts from an unrecognized device in Atlanta, Georgia. Given the recent cyber attacks targeting military personnel that you've already experienced, we're being especially vigilant with accounts like yours." The mention of Atlanta was a calculated risk. If Vanessa had access to the account, she might have been checking it from there during house hunting visits. Marcus's sharp intake of breath told me I'd struck gold. "I was in Atlanta last weekend," he said, tension evident in his voice. "It was probably me." "I see. However, these attempts were from earlier today, and our system flagged them because the user failed the security questions multiple times before gaining access." Another pause. Longer this time. "What exactly was accessed?" "That's what I'm calling to verify, sir. As a security precaution, we need to confirm that you're still the only authorized user on this account. Our records show that approximately $37,500 was transferred into this account recently, followed by several smaller outgoing transfers to a title company in Atlanta. We just need to verify that these transactions were authorized by you." Marcus's voice turned cold. "Look, I don't appreciate these kinds of invasive questions. If I'm the account holder, then obviously I authorized the transactions." "Of course, sir. I completely understand your concern for privacy. We simply need to complete our security verification process. If you could please confirm the source of the funds that were transferred into this account on April 15th, we can close this security alert." "The funds were mine to transfer," he snapped, "from a joint account with my wife. But that's none of your business. And the transfers to Peachtree Title Services in Atlanta totaling $2,500, those were also authorized by you?" "Yes, damn it. It's for a property purchase. Is that sufficient? Or would you like to know what I had for breakfast too?" I permitted myself a small smile. Peachtree Title Services. Now I had the name of the company handling the condo purchase. "Just one final verification, sir. The remaining balance of approximately $15,000. Our records show a recent transaction at Cartier in Atlanta. Can you confirm that was also an authorized purchase?" Marcus's voice turned dangerously quiet. "Who did you say you were again?" "Meredith Collins, Account Security Department. I've made a note in your file that all recent transactions were authorized by you personally. Thank you for your cooperation, Captain Winters. Is there anything else we can help you with today?" "No," he said tersely. "But I'd like to speak with your supervisor about your questioning techniques." "I'd be happy to transfer you," I replied smoothly. "Please hold." I ended the call and immediately turned off the burner phone. My heart was pounding, but I'd gotten what I needed: confirmation that the missing money had gone to the account. Ending in 4738, that $22,500 had been transferred to Peachtree Title Services for the condo down payment, and that the Cartier purchase had been charged to the same account. More importantly, I'd planted a seed of doubt in Marcus's mind about the security of his secret account. He would be rattled, wondering if someone really had attempted to access his account from Atlanta. He might even contact the bank to verify the security alert, only to be told no such alert existed. His confidence would be shaken, and a man whose confidence is shaken makes mistakes. I allowed myself a moment of satisfaction before moving on to the next phase of my plan. Marcus had taught me the importance of psychological operations during warfare, how creating uncertainty and anxiety in your opponent could be as effective as direct confrontation. It was time to put those lessons to use. Marcus returned home that evening earlier than usual, his jaw tight and his movements sharp with barely controlled agitation. I was in the kitchen preparing a salad, the picture of domestic normality, when he walked in and headed straight for the liquor cabinet. "Rough day?" I asked, keeping my tone light as I watched him pour a double whiskey. He took a long swallow before answering. "Just some security issues with the bank. Nothing important." Oh? Is this about our missing money? I set down my knife, giving him my full attention. Did they find something? Marcus waved a dismissive hand. No, just routine security checks. False alarm. He finished his drink in one gulp and poured another. I'm going to take a shower. I nodded, returning to my salad preparation as if I hadn't noticed his unusual behavior. Inside, however, I was cataloging every detail, the slight tremor in his hand as he poured his drink, the way his eyes darted around the room as if searching for surveillance devices, the tension visible in his shoulders. My call had rattled him, just as I'd intended. While he showered, his phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. I glanced over. AI. Text from Greg S. appeared on the screen. Call me ASAP. Problem with the paperwork. I smiled to myself as I set the table for dinner. Marcus wasn't the only one who could create problems. That morning, after my bank manager call, I had made another strategic move. Using the information I'd gathered about Peachtree Title Services, I'd called their office, posing as Vanessa Reyes's assistant. Dr. Reyes asked me to verify the documentation requirements for the Buckhead property closing. I'd explained to the clerk who answered. She's in surgery all day and wanted me to ensure everything is in order. The clerk had been helpful, confirming that they needed marriage certificates for both parties before proceeding, since one of the buyers was still legally married. We need to verify that the divorce proceedings have been initiated, she'd explained. Otherwise, the current spouse could make a claim on the property. I understand, I'd replied. And when is this documentation due? We need it by end of business Friday to keep the closing on schedule for next month. Excellent, I'd said. And just to confirm, we're sending these directly to you, not through Mr. Winters, correct? That's right. Though he called earlier today to check on the status. He seemed quite concerned about meeting the timeline. After the call, I'd used my burner phone to send a text message to Vanessa's number, which I'd found while searching through Marcus's phone records online. This is Beverly from Peachtree Title. There's an issue with the paperwork for the Buckhead property. Please have Mr. Winters call our office immediately. Now, watching Marcus emerge from the shower, dressed in fresh clothes with his hair still damp, I could see the plan working. He checked his phone immediately, his expression darkening as he read the message. Without a word, he headed to his study, closing the door firmly behind him. I moved silently down the hallway, positioning myself near the study door just as I had before. Marcus was speaking in hushed, urgent tones. What do you mean they need proof of divorce proceedings? We discussed this. Everything was supposed to be in place before I filed. His voice was tense, controlled, but with an undercurrent of panic. A pause as Vanessa presumably responded. No, absolutely not. We cannot move up the timeline. Everything is carefully choreographed. The job transition, the asset transfers, everything. If I file for divorce now, before the money is secured, Sarah could contest it. She could freeze the accounts. Another pause, longer this time. Look, I understand you're worried about the condo, but trust me, I have everything under control. We just need to find a workaround with the title company. His voice softened. Baby, please. After everything we've planned, everything we've worked for, we can't let a technicality derail us. More back and forth, Marcus growing increasingly frustrated. No, I haven't forgotten about the bracelet. Yes, I still want you to wear it to the Wilsons' anniversary party. No one from my unit will be there except Greg, and he's the soul of discretion. The Wilsons' anniversary party. I knew about this event. Colonel Wilson and his wife were celebrating 30 years of marriage with a gala at the Officers' Club that weekend. Marcus had told me he couldn't attend due to training obligations. Another lie in a growing tapestry of deception. I'll figure something out with the title company, Marcus was saying, his voice regaining its confident edge. Just focus on your presentation for the medical conference. I've got this handled. After he hung up, I returned quietly to the kitchen, resuming my dinner preparations as if I'd never left. When Marcus finally emerged from his study, I could see the calculations running behind his eyes, the strategic adjustments being made to his carefully constructed plan. "Everything okay?" I asked, setting a plate of grilled chicken and roasted vegetables in front of him. "Fine," he replied shortly. "Just work stuff." I nodded sympathetically. "You seem stressed lately. Is there anything I can do to help?" For a brief moment, something like guilt flickered across his face. Then his expression hardened again. "No, everything's fine." "Well, if you need to talk, I'm here," I offered, the irony of my words not lost on me. I was leveraging 15 years of trust and emotional intimacy, the very things he had been systematically destroying, to further my own counter-strategy. Later that night, while Marcus slept beside me, he'd insisted on our shared bed again. Perhaps to maintain the illusion of normalcy, I stared at the ceiling and reflected on how quickly my life had transformed. Just days ago, I had been a trusting wife, concerned about a bank error. Now I was engaged in psychological warfare with the man I had pledged to love until death parted us. The next morning, I left early for work, telling Marcus I had a student crisis to handle before school. Instead, I drove to the office of a private investigator recommended by Diana, my divorce attorney. Raymond Diaz operated out of a nondescript office above a convenience store downtown. He was a retired police detective with a no-nonsense manner and eyes that missed nothing. "I need information." "On two people," I explained after outlining my situation. "My husband, Captain Marcus Winters, and Dr. Vanessa Reyes. I need to know the extent of their relationship, any financial connections, and anything else that might be relevant to my case." Raymond nodded, making notes on a yellow legal pad. "Military. Man planning an exit strategy. I've seen it before. What specific information are you hoping to find?" "I need documented evidence of their affair. Photos, videos, anything that proves infidelity. I need details about any joint financial planning they've done, and I need to know if there are other accounts or assets I'm not aware of." "Timeline?" "As soon as possible. My husband is planning to leave me in approximately 7 weeks. I need to be fully prepared before that happens." Raymond quoted his rates, which were steep but not prohibitive given what was at stake. I wrote him a check from my new personal account and provided all the information I had on both Marcus and Vanessa. "One more thing," I added before leaving. "I'd like to know if she's aware that he's emptied our joint account without my knowledge or consent. I need to understand if she's a willing participant in the financial deception or just the beneficiary of it." Raymond raised an eyebrow. "You're wondering if she has moral qualms. In my experience, people who get involved with married individuals aren't usually overly concerned with ethics. Even so, I'd like to know. It might be relevant." After leaving Raymond's office, I drove to the school, arriving just in time for my first appointment of the day. As I guided students through their college applications and career planning, I maintained a calm, supportive demeanor while inside. My mind was racing with scenarios and contingency plans. During my lunch break, I received a text from an unknown number. "Initial surveillance established. Target 1 headed to Atlanta with Target 2. Following. Will report tonight." Raymond worked quickly. Marcus had told me he would be at the base all day for equipment inspections, yet another lie in an endless series. That afternoon, I used my planning period to make another strategic call, this time to the Human Resources Department at Meridian Security Solutions in Atlanta, Marcus's future employer. "Good afternoon," I said when the call was answered. "This is Dr. Vanessa Reyes. I believe you have an employment file for my fiancé, Marcus Winters?" "Yes, Captain Winters is scheduled to start with us next month," the HR representative confirmed. "Is there something I can help you with, Dr. Reyes?" "I'm calling about his relocation package," I explained. "We're finalizing our housing arrangements in Atlanta, and I needed to confirm the exact amount allocated for moving expenses. Marcus mentioned it was $15,000, but I can't find the documentation." "Let me check his file," the representative said. After a brief pause, she continued. "Actually, The relocation package is $25,000, not $15,000. It's all detailed in Section 3 of his employment contract. Oh, wonderful. That's very helpful. And just to confirm, the signing bonus of $50,000 is scheduled for disbursement upon his start date, correct? That's right. The signing bonus will be paid with his first paycheck, assuming all onboarding documentation is complete. Perfect. Thank you so much for your help. I ended the call with a clearer picture of Marcus's financial situation. He stood to receive $75,000 from Meridian within weeks of starting, money that, as his legal wife, I would have a claim to in divorce proceedings unless he managed to hide it or delay our divorce until after he received it. The pieces of his plan were becoming clearer. The money from our joint account was funding the condo down payment and Vanessa's bracelet. The relocation package would cover their moving expenses. The signing bonus would establish their new life together. All of it carefully timed to minimize his financial exposure in the divorce he planned to initiate once the money was secured. That evening, Marcus called to say he would be working late again. I expressed understanding and concern, playing my role as the oblivious, supportive wife, while knowing he was with Vanessa in Atlanta. After we hung up, I received an email from Raymond with a link to a secure server. The photos were better than I'd hoped for. Marcus and Vanessa touring the Buckhead condo, having lunch at an upscale restaurant, and most damning of all, visiting a jeweler where she tried on what appeared to be wedding bands. The timestamp on the photos was from earlier that day. I downloaded everything, backing up the files to the secure cloud storage Amara had set up for me. Then I forwarded selected images to Diana with a brief message. Evidence gathering proceeding well. Will call tomorrow to discuss next steps. As I was preparing for bed, my phone pinged with another text from an unknown number. Raymond again. Target 2 meeting tomorrow with unknown female, 10 a.m. Riverside Coffee House. Might be relevant. I stared at the message, puzzled. Who would Vanessa be meeting? Another conspirator in their plan? Or something else entirely? Despite my better judgment, I knew I would be at that coffee house tomorrow. Some questions couldn't be answered through proxies and surveillance reports. Sometimes you needed to see for yourself. The next morning, I dressed carefully in clothes Marcus had never seen. A navy blazer purchased for work but never worn, sunglasses, and my hair pulled back in a style I rarely used. I positioned myself in the far corner of the Riverside Coffee House at 9:45 a.m., a laptop open in front of me as if I were working, with a clear view of the entrance. At precisely 10:02, Vanessa walked in. She was striking, tall and elegant, with a confident bearing that commanded attention. Her dark hair was cut in a sleek bob, and she wore a well-tailored pantsuit that screamed professional success. I could see why Marcus had been drawn to her. She exuded competence and sophistication. She scanned the room before taking a seat near the window. 5 minutes later, a young woman entered, early 20s, casually dressed, looking nervous. Vanessa waved her over, and the young woman sat down across from her, fidgeting with the strap of her messenger bag. From my position, I couldn't hear their conversation, but I could see their body language. Vanessa was leaning forward, speaking intently. The younger woman was tense, defensive. At one point, she shook her head vehemently, and Vanessa reached across the table to place a restraining hand on her arm. The meeting lasted exactly 30 minutes. At the end, Vanessa handed the young woman an envelope, which she reluctantly accepted before leaving in a hurry. Vanessa remained at the table, sipping her coffee with a satisfied expression. I waited until she left before following, discreetly. She walked 2 blocks to the VA hospital and entered through the staff entrance. I made a note of the time and her apparent work schedule, then returned to my car. On the drive home, I called Raymond to report what I'd seen and asked him to identify the young woman if possible. Then I called Diana for a strategy session. Things are moving quickly, I told her. They're actively planning their future together, touring properties, shopping for rings. I need to understand my options if he files for divorce before I'm ready. Based on what you've shared, Diana replied, we have multiple angles to pursue. The financial deception alone gives us leverage. Add in the documented infidelity, and we're in a strong position. But timing is critical. If he receives that signing, bonus before you file, it complicates things. What do you recommend? Honestly, file first. As soon as you have all the documentation we need, file the papers. It gives you procedural advantages, especially if you can demonstrate that he's actively hiding assets. I considered this. Filing first meant giving up the element of surprise. It meant confrontation rather than continued intelligence gathering. But it also meant regaining control of the narrative. Let me think about it, I said finally. I still feel like there are pieces missing. After hanging up, I sat in my parked car weighing my options. The direct approach would be to confront Marcus with everything I knew, file for divorce, and let the legal system handle the financial aspects. The strategic approach would be to continue gathering intelligence, setting traps, and preparing for the perfect moment to strike. Marcus had always said that patience was the most underrated weapon in warfare. Wait until you have overwhelming advantage, he'd told me once, describing a mission in Afghanistan. Then strike with everything you've got. I decided to wait. Just a little longer. Just until I had overwhelming advantage. That evening, Raymond called with information about the young woman from the coffee shop. Her name is Lily Carter, he said without preamble. 24 years old, works as a physical therapy assistant at the VA hospital. She's been there about 2 years. Any connection to Marcus or Vanessa beyond work? That's where it gets interesting, Raymond replied, his voice taking on a more serious tone. I had my contact at the hospital do some digging. Lily was engaged to a Marine Corps sergeant named David Carter until his death last year, killed in a training accident at Camp Lejeune. After his death, she transferred to the local VA for family reasons. I'm not seeing the connection yet, I admitted. Sergeant Carter was in a special Joint Forces training program under your husband's command for 6 months before his death. Captain Winters was his commanding officer when the accident happened. A chill ran through me. Are you saying Marcus was responsible for this man's death? Not directly. The official report cleared everyone of wrongdoing, equipment failure during a night exercise. But here's where it gets murky. Vanessa Reyes was the lead psychiatrist, assigned to counsel the surviving team members. That's how she and your husband met. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. So while this woman was grieving her fiancé, Vanessa was starting an affair with the officer who commanded the mission where he died. Looks that way, Raymond confirmed. And based on what my contact overheard, Lily recently found out about their relationship and wasn't happy about it. The meeting you witnessed was Vanessa trying to smooth things over. With money, I said, remembering the envelope. Exactly. Ms. Carter has apparently been making noise about the relationship being inappropriate given Dr. Reyes's professional position. Not good for either of their careers if that gained traction. After hanging up, I sat in my darkened living room, processing this new information. What had started as a straightforward case of infidelity was revealing layers of professional misconduct and possible ethical violations. If Vanessa had begun a relationship with Marcus while he was under her professional care, even informally as part of his unit's post-accident counseling, that was a serious breach of medical ethics. More importantly, it provided another avenue of leverage. If Vanessa's career and professional standing were threatened, how might that affect their carefully orchestrated plans? I was still contemplating this when headlights swept across the living room window, Marcus returning home earlier than expected. I quickly composed myself, adopting the relaxed posture of someone watching television rather than plotting countermeasures against her husband's betrayal. You're home early, I observed as he entered, keeping my tone neutral. Marcus hung his keys on the hook by the door, his movements precise and controlled. Meeting ended sooner than expected. He looked tired, the lines around his eyes more pronounced than usual. For a brief moment, I felt an echo of the concern I would have once. Felt automatically, I pushed it aside. "Have you eaten?" I asked, rising from the couch. "I can heat something up." "I'm not hungry." He poured himself a whiskey, his third night in a row of immediate alcohol upon returning home. "Any word from the bank about our missing money?" The direct question caught me off guard. We'd barely discussed the bank error since his initial dismissal of my concerns. "No," I replied carefully. "I was waiting for you to handle it, like you said." He nodded absently, swirling, the amber liquid in his glass. "I'll call them again tomorrow. Bureaucratic incompetence, that's all it is." I studied his face, searching for signs of guilt or deception, but his expression remained impassive, the same disciplined control that had served him well in combat zones. "Is everything okay?" I ventured. "You seem preoccupied lately." Flash of something, annoyance, wariness, crossed his features before disappearing behind a practiced smile. "Just work stress. Nothing for you to worry about." "If there's something wrong, Marcus, you know you can talk to me, right? Whatever it is, we can face it together." The words tasted bitter on my tongue, an offer of partnership to a man who had already abandoned our team without bothering to inform me. He regarded me silently for a moment, and I wondered if he was considering a confession. Then he drained his glass and set it down with finality. "I'm fine. Just tired. I'm going to bed." As he climbed the stairs, I wondered what calculations were running through his mind. Was he reconsidering his timeline, adjusting his strategy, or simply managing his compartmentalized life with the tactical precision that had made him an effective military leader? The next morning, I woke early and drove to the local bank branch, where I had an appointment with the manager, a real one. This time. "Mrs. Winters," Monica Patel greeted me warmly, ushering me into her office. "How can I help you today?" I had dressed carefully for this meeting in a conservative suit that projected competence and seriousness. "I need to discuss some concerns about my joint account with my husband." For the next half hour, I explained the situation, the missing funds, Marcus's evasiveness, and my discovery of his affair and planned departure. Monica listened without judgment, occasionally making notes. Unfortunately, with a joint account, either party can legally withdraw funds without the other's consent, she explained when I finished. However, given the circumstances, there are steps we can take to protect your interests going forward. She advised me to open a new individual account immediately and ensure all my future income was directed there. She helped me remove my name from the now empty joint account to protect me from any future liabilities Marcus might incur. "What about recovering the money he took?" I asked. Monica's expression was sympathetic but firm. "Legally, he had the right to withdraw those funds. In a divorce proceeding, the court might order him to repay your portion, but the bank can't intervene in what is essentially a dispute between account holders." I had expected this answer but still felt a pang of frustration. "Is there any way to track where the money went? For the divorce proceedings, I mean." "We can provide statements showing the withdrawal, but where he deposited the funds afterward would be protected information unless subpoenaed." I thanked her for her candor and was preparing to leave when she added, "Mrs. Winters, one more thing. Your husband called yesterday asking about security protocols for our high-value accounts. He seemed particularly interested in how we verify identity for phone inquiries." My heart skipped a beat. Did he mention why he was asking? He said he'd received a suspicious call from someone claiming to be from our security department. Naturally, we confirmed that no such call had been made by the bank. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. He mentioned something about that. Probably just a phishing attempt, most likely. But it's worth being vigilant. Financial fraud often increases during divorce proceedings, unfortunately. I left the bank with mixed emotions. Marcus was investigating my bank manager call, which meant he was suspicious, but not yet certain it had been me. I would need to be more careful moving forward. My next stop was the office of Colonel James Reynolds, the military attorney Diana had recommended I consult about the military-specific aspects of my situation. His office was located off-base in a small professional building that housed several independent practices. Colonel Reynolds, retired, was a square-jawed man with a precisely trimmed silver mustache and the erect posture of someone who had spent decades in uniform. His handshake was firm, his assessment direct. "From what you've described," he said after I'd outlined my situation, "your husband is violating several military regulations regarding financial support of dependents. The Army takes a dim view of service members who abandon their financial responsibilities, especially officers who are held to a higher standard of conduct." "What are my options?" I asked. "You could file a formal complaint with his commanding officer. The Army can garnish wages, revoke privileges, even affect promotion potential. In extreme cases, there can be charges under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Would his relationship with Dr. Reyes compound the issue?" Colonel Reynolds raised an eyebrow. "If she was providing him professional care at any point, absolutely. The military has strict policies about fraternization and professional boundaries. A psychiatrist becoming romantically involved with someone under her care could face licensing issues, not to mention military administrative actions if she's a VA employee." He provided me with the necessary forms to file a formal complaint, though he echoed Gloria's warning that this was a nuclear option. Once initiated, it would irreversibly impact Marcus's military career. "Consider it a last resort," he advised. "Military proceedings can complicate civilian divorce cases. Sometimes it's better to keep these channels separate." I left with the forms securely in my briefcase, another weapon in my growing arsenal. I had no immediate plans to use them, but their mere existence gave me a sense of control I had been lacking since discovering Marcus's betrayal. That afternoon, I met with Diana to update her on my progress and discuss next steps. "You've been busy," she remarked, reviewing the documentation I'd gathered. "This is impressive work, especially considering the short time frame." "I've had a good teacher in strategic thinking," I replied, thinking of the irony that Marcus's own lessons in tactical planning were now being used against him. Diana laid out 3 possible approaches: immediate confrontation and filing, continued covert evidence gathering, or what she called a controlled reveal, strategically exposing that I knew about his plans without showing my full hand. "The controlled reveal has advantages," she explained. "It might force him to make mistakes or accelerate his timeline in ways that benefit us. But it's also unpredictable. Once he knows you're aware, the dynamic changes completely." I considered the options, weighing each against what I knew of Marcus's character and likely responses. "I think I need something more definitive before confronting him. Some piece of leverage that he can't dismiss or minimize." "Such as?" I thought about the various threads I'd been pulling: the financial deception, the affair with Vanessa, the connection to Lily Carter and her fiancé's death. "I need to understand exactly what happened with Sergeant Carter's death," I said slowly. "And I need to know what Vanessa has on Marcus that gives her such confidence in their future together." Diana's expression turned cautious. "Be careful. There. Military accidents, especially those involving fatalities, can be politically sensitive. If you start digging too deeply, you might attract unwanted attention." "I'll be discreet," I assured her. "But something tells me there's more to that story than equipment failure. Marcus has always been meticulous about safety protocols." After our meeting, I drove to the local cemetery where, according to the obituary Raymond had found, Sergeant David Carter was buried. I wanted to pay my respects, but also to see if Lily might visit her fiancé's grave. A long shot, but worth trying. The cemetery was peaceful in the late afternoon sun, rows of headstones casting long shadows across the manicured grass. I found Carter's grave easily, a simple military marker with the Marine Corps emblem. Someone had recently placed fresh flowers there, the stems still green and vibrant. As I stood contemplating the young life cut short, a voice behind me asked, "Did you know David?" I turned to find Lily Carter watching me, a small bouquet of daisies in her hand. Up close, she looked even younger than in the coffee shop, her face pale and drawn with lingering grief. "No," I admitted. "But I know the officer who commanded his final mission." Lily's expression hardened. "Captain Winters." I nodded, deciding in that moment to be honest. "I'm his wife, or at least I am for now." Confusion crossed her features, followed by a flash of understanding. "You're Sarah? The one he's leaving for Vanessa?" The blunt question should have hurt. But instead, I felt oddly relieved to be speaking plainly after days of deception and counter-deception. "Yes, though I only discovered their plans recently." Lily placed her flowers beside the others, then straightened to face me fully. "I'm sorry. That's a terrible thing to learn." "Thank you. I'm sorry about your fiancé." She glanced down at the grave, her expression softening. "David was a good man, the best I've ever known. He deserved better than what happened to him." "What did happen?" I asked gently. "The official report said equipment failure, but—" Lily's laugh was sharp, brittle. "Is that what your husband told you? That David died because of faulty equipment?" "He didn't tell me anything," I admitted. "Marcus never discusses mission details, successful or otherwise." She studied me for a moment, as if deciding whether to trust me. Finally, she reached into her bag and pulled out a sealed envelope. "David sent me this letter before the exercise. I received it 3 days after his death." She handed it to me, her hand trembling slightly. "I'm tired of keeping his secrets. Read it, then we'll talk." I accepted the envelope with a solemn nod, understanding the weight of what she was entrusting to me. Not just a piece of paper, but perhaps the key to understanding the true foundation of Marcus and Vanessa's relationship. With trembling fingers, I opened the envelope Lily had given me. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded neatly, the creases worn from repeated readings. The handwriting was cramped but legible, the words of a man who had something urgent to convey. "My dearest Lily, if you're reading this, something's gone wrong. The mission tomorrow isn't sitting right with me. Captain Winters has been acting strange, distracted, making decisions that don't align with standard protocols. We're using experimental night vision equipment that hasn't been fully field tested, and the terrain is treacherous. I've voiced my concerns, but the captain insists we proceed. What worries me most is that this exercise seems unnecessary, a showcase rather than practical training. There are civilians observing, including that psychiatrist who's been hanging, around the unit. The captain seems fixated on impressing them. I've documented my objections in the official pre-mission report. If anything happens, there will be a record that safety concerns were raised and dismissed. Look for file code NVTR47. No matter what, remember that I love you. If I don't make it back, don't let them write me off as a training statistic. Always. Yours, David." I looked up at Lily, my mouth dry. "Have you tried to access this report he mentioned?" She shook her head. "Military bureaucracy is impenetrable for civilians. By the time I received the letter, the official investigation was already concluding with its equipment failure finding. No one was interested in a dead Marine's concerns." "What happened after you got this?" Lily's eyes hardened. "Vanessa Reyes happened. She was assigned to provide grief counseling to the families. She seemed so caring, so concerned. She convinced me that pursuing David's suspicions would only prolong my pain, that closure meant accepting the official findings. And you trusted her." "At first." Until I saw her with your husband at a restaurant 3 months after David died. The way they looked at each other, it wasn't professional. When I confronted her, she claimed their relationship started long after the counseling ended. But I knew that was a lie. I carefully refolded the letter. This report David mentioned. It could prove that Marcus deliberately ignored safety protocols. More than that, Lily said quietly. It could prove he prioritized showing off for Vanessa over the safety of his men. David told me before the mission that Captain Winters had been spending unusual amounts of time with the civilian observers, particularly Dr. Reyes. He thought the captain was trying to impress her with his leadership abilities. The implications were staggering. If Marcus had compromised safety standards to impress Vanessa, resulting in a Marine's death, his military career wouldn't just be damaged. It would be over. There could even be criminal charges. Why hasn't Vanessa been more concerned about this coming to light? I wondered aloud. Lily's bitter laugh surprised me. Because your husband protected her. The final report omitted any mention of civilian observers. As far as the official record shows, she wasn't even there that day. They've been covering for each other from the beginning, I murmured, the full picture finally coming into focus. That's what the money was for, Lily confirmed. At the coffee shop, Vanessa offered me $50,000 to sign a non-disclosure agreement. She said it was compensation for my loss, but we both knew it was hush money. Did you take it? I told her I needed time to think. The truth is, I don't want her money. I want justice for David. She met my gaze directly. I want people to know what really happened. I looked down at the letter in my hands, the testimony of a dead man who had foreseen his own fate. This was the leverage I had been seeking. This was how I would regain control. Lily, I said slowly, I think we can help each other. Lily and I spent the next hour formulating a plan. We needed the pre-mission report David had mentioned, the document that would prove Marcus had ignored safety concerns to impress Vanessa. Without it, we had only David's letter, which, while powerful, could be dismissed as the anxieties of a soldier before a dangerous exercise. The report would be in the military archives, Lily explained, but accessing it would require security. Clearance neither of us has, I thought for a moment. Maybe we don't need to access it directly. Maybe we just need Marcus to believe we have. After exchanging contact information, I left the cemetery with renewed purpose. The scales had tipped in my favor. Marcus and Vanessa weren't just guilty of infidelity and financial deception. They were potentially complicit in negligence that had cost a man his life, followed by a cover-up to protect their careers and budding relationship. I considered my next move carefully. A frontal assault would be expected, emotional confrontation, accusations, tears. Marcus would be prepared for that. He'd have his denials ready, his counter-arguments polished. No, I needed to be more strategic. That evening, I acted as if nothing had changed. I prepared dinner, discussed mundane household matters with Marcus, and retired to bed at my usual time. He remained distant, but seemed less agitated than previous nights, perhaps believing his plans were proceeding smoothly after the initial scare with the fake bank call. The next morning, I waited until Marcus left for work, then called Raymond to arrange surveillance of Vanessa's house that evening. Next, I contacted Diana to update her on what I'd learned. This changes things, she said after I'd explained David's letter and Lily's account. If there's evidence of professional misconduct leading to a death, both Marcus and Dr. Reyes have significant exposure, criminally and civilly. How do we leverage that without the actual report? Diana's voice turned thoughtful. Sometimes the threat of exposure is more powerful than exposure itself. They don't know what evidence you have or don't have. That uncertainty creates vulnerability. After our call, I drove to work, maintaining my normal routine. During my lunch break, I received a text from Raymond. Target 2 alone tonight. Target 1 scheduled for overnight duty according to base roster. Perfect. With Marcus occupied with military duties, I could approach Vanessa without fear of interference. This would be my first direct move in the campaign to reclaim my life and finances. That evening, I dressed carefully in clothing that projected confidence and authority, a charcoal suit I wore for parent-teacher conferences, pearl earrings that had belonged to my grandmother, low heels that didn't compromise mobility. I wanted Vanessa to see me not as a victim, but as a formidable opponent. I drove to her riverside home, parking a block away to gather my thoughts. The neighborhood was quiet, upper-middle class, with well-maintained homes and manicured lawns. Lights glowed warmly behind Vanessa's front windows. Taking a deep breath, I walked to her door and rang the bell. There was a moment of silence, then the sound of approaching footsteps. The door opened to reveal Vanessa, wearing yoga pants and a loose sweater, her professional polish momentarily set aside. Her expression shifted from polite inquiry to shock as she recognized me. "Sarah," she said, her voice carefully controlled despite the surprise evident in her eyes. "This is unexpected." "I'm sure it is," I replied calmly. "May I come in? I think we need to talk about file code NVTR47. The color drained from her face. Without a word, she stepped back, allowing me to enter. Vanessa's living room was tastefully decorated in neutral tones, with carefully arranged artwork on the walls and a plush sofa that probably cost more than a month of my salary. I noted the absence of personal photos. No family portraits, no candid moments with Marcus. She kept her private life concealed, just as she had concealed her relationship with my husband. "Please, sit down," she offered, gesturing to the sofa, while maintaining a careful distance between us. Despite her casual attire, she carried herself with the polished composure of someone accustomed to managing difficult situations. "Would you like something to drink?" "No, thank you," I replied, choosing an armchair rather than the sofa. I wanted to face her directly, not sit side by side as if we were friends having a casual chat. "I'll be brief. I know about your relationship with Marcus, the money he's taken from our joint account, and your plans to move to Atlanta together." She didn't bother denying it. Instead, she settled into a chair opposite me, her expression recalibrating from shock to professional assessment. "I understand this must be difficult for you, Sarah. Finding out your marriage is ending is never easy." Her condescension ignited a flare of anger that I quickly suppressed. Getting emotional would only play into her hands. "What's difficult?" I countered evenly, "is discovering that my husband isn't just having an affair. He's complicit in covering up negligence that led to a Marine's death. Negligence that you, as a medical professional, participated in concealing." Vanessa's composure slipped momentarily, her eyes widening before she regained control. "I don't know what Marcus has told you, but the training accident was thoroughly investigated. Equipment failure was the official finding." "Yes, the official finding," I agreed. "Very convenient that the pre-mission safety concerns documented in Report NVTR47 were overlooked. Even more convenient that civilian observers weren't mentioned in the final report." Her fingers tightened almost imperceptibly on the armrest. "You seem to have been misinformed. Military investigations are thorough and objective." Sergeant Carter didn't think so. In fact, he was so concerned about safety violations that he documented everything before the mission. I leaned forward slightly. "Lily Carter shared his letter with me. She's also prepared to go on record about your attempts to buy her silence." For several seconds, Vanessa said nothing, her clinical gaze assessing me as if I were a patient presenting unexpected symptoms. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a new note of caution. "What exactly do you want, Sarah?" It was the question I'd been waiting for, the acknowledgement that we were now negotiating, not merely having a confrontation. "I want what's rightfully mine," I stated plainly. "The money Marcus took from our joint account, plus half of all assets acquired during our marriage. I want my fair share of his military pension, which he earned while I supported his career. And I want an expedited, uncontested divorce with Marcus, taking full responsibility for the dissolution of our marriage. Vanessa's laugh held no humor. And if these demands aren't met, you'll what? Go public with unsubstantiated claims about a training accident that happened over a year ago? Claims based on a letter from a deceased Marine who was clearly anxious before a dangerous mission? The military protects its own, Sarah. They'll close ranks. Perhaps, I conceded. But the military also values its reputation. A scandal involving an officer compromising safety standards to impress a psychiatrist, followed by both of them covering it up while beginning an affair? That would generate significant media interest. At minimum, it would trigger a reinvestigation. I could see the calculations running behind her eyes, the professional consequences, the potential damage to her carefully cultivated reputation, the impact on their future plans. And let's not forget your ethical violations, I continued calmly. Beginning a relationship with someone who was effectively under your care, even if indirectly. The medical licensing board would have questions about that, wouldn't they? Vanessa stood abruptly, walking to the window to compose herself. When she turned back, her expression had hardened into something more determined. You're bluffing, she said flatly. You don't have access to the pre-mission report. If you did, you wouldn't be here threatening me. You'd have already gone to the authorities. I smiled, feeling a strange calm despite the tension crackling between us. You're welcome to take that chance. Personally, I wouldn't risk my medical license and freedom on a bluff, but that's your decision to make. For a moment, I saw uncertainty flicker across her face. Then her professional mask reasserted itself. I'll need to discuss this with Marcus, she said finally. These allegations are serious and require careful consideration. Of course, I replied, standing to leave. You have 48 hours to respond. After that, I'll be meeting with military, investigators, the medical licensing board, and several journalists who would find this story very interesting. As I reached the door, Vanessa called after me, her voice tight with controlled anger. You know, he doesn't love you anymore. Hasn't for years. Fighting like this won't change that. I turned back, meeting her gaze steadily. This isn't about love, Vanessa. It's about justice. For me, and for David Carter. The mention of David's name landed like a physical blow. I saw genuine fear in her eyes as I closed the door behind me. The confrontation with Vanessa changed everything. Within hours, my phone was buzzing with a call from Marcus, his voice tightly controlled, but undercut with barely suppressed panic. I let it go to voicemail, listening as he requested, then demanded, that I call him back immediately to discuss recent developments. 3 more calls followed, each message growing increasingly desperate. I didn't respond. Let him stew in uncertainty, just as I had when discovering our empty bank account. The next morning, I awoke to find Marcus sitting at our kitchen table, still in his uniform from overnight duty, his expression haggard from lack of sleep. He'd clearly come straight home rather than going to Vanessa's as he normally would. We need to talk, he said, his commanding officer tone abandoned in favor of something approaching humility. I poured myself coffee, taking my time before sitting across from him. I'm listening. Vanessa told me about your visit, he began, watching me carefully. About your allegations. They're not allegations, Marcus. They're facts. He drew a deep breath. Look, what happened to Sergeant Carter was a tragedy, a genuine accident during a high-risk training exercise. But the implication that I somehow caused it or covered anything up is completely false. Really? Then you won't mind if I request access to the pre-mission report, file code NVTR47? The blood drained from his face. How do you know about that? The same way I know about your affair, your plans to leave me, and the $37,540 you stole from our joint account. I've been doing my homework. For the first time in our marriage, I saw Marcus completely off balance, his carefully constructed plans crumbling before him. He ran his hand through his hair, a rare gesture of frustration from a man who prided himself on unshakable composure. "What do you want?" he asked finally, echoing Vanessa's question from the night before. "Full financial restoration," I replied without hesitation. "Every penny you took, plus half of all our marital assets. An uncontested divorce with you taking full responsibility, and my fair share of your military pension. And if I agree, then the pre-mission report stays buried. Your career continues." Vanessa keeps her medical license. Life goes on, just not with the fairy tale ending you planned. Marcus sat in silence, weighing his options. I could almost see the tactical analysis happening behind his eyes, assessing threats, evaluating contingencies, calculating acceptable losses. "You have until tomorrow to decide," I added, rising from the table. "After that, I take this to people who won't be as understanding as I am." By evening, Marcus had transferred the full amount back to a new joint account he'd opened that morning. By the next day, divorce papers were drawn up according to my terms, with Marcus waiving any claims to contest the settlement. Within a week, preliminary financial disclosures revealed assets I hadn't known existed: investments, a small property in Virginia, retirement accounts he'd kept hidden. Vanessa disappeared from his life as quickly as she'd entered it. According to Raymond's sources, she applied for a position at a private practice in California, suddenly abandoning their shared Atlanta dreams. The diamond bracelet appeared in my mailbox with a simple note: "This belongs to you." Marcus moved out the following weekend, taking only his personal belongings and leaving behind the life we had built together. As he loaded the last box into his car, he paused. "You know, I never thought you had this in you," he said, something like reluctant admiration in his voice. "This level of tactical thinking." "I learned from the best," I replied simply. 3 months later, our divorce was finalized. I kept the house, my fair share of all assets, and secured my portion of his military pension. Marcus accepted a less prestigious position at a different base. His meteoric career trajectory permanently altered. The truth about Sergeant Carter's death remained buried, not to protect Marcus and Vanessa, but because Lily decided that justice for David meant ensuring his sacrifice wasn't forgotten, not destroying the institution he had loved. As for me, I discovered strengths I never knew I possessed. The woman who had once deferred to her husband's judgment in all things had found her own strategic mind, her own capacity for decisive action. I used part of the restored funds to establish a scholarship in David Carter's name for children of V. Marines lost during service, a small measure of good from a situation built on betrayal. Sometimes I think about the irony of it all, how Marcus spent years teaching me to be resilient, to adapt to military life with its constant changes and challenges. In the end, those lessons served me well, just not in the way either of us had anticipated. If you've enjoyed this story of betrayal and strategic justice, please subscribe to my channel for more tales of women who refuse to be victims when life dealt them unexpected blows. Remember that sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying your opponent. It's about reclaiming what's rightfully yours and building something better from the ashes of what was lost. Like, comment, and share. If this story resonated with you, and I'll be back next week with another journey of transformation and triumph.